Thank you very much for joining today. I'm Susan. I'm the Director of Environment for the Americas, and it's a pleasure to have these webinars. They're so amazing to meet with you all. Environment for the Americas coordinates this program across the Americas, and so we work with partners and partnership. It's what makes this such an amazing opportunity. And next, I'd like to invite Min Jae Beck, who is the Communications Officer for the East Asian Australasian Flyway Partnership. Min Jae, would you like to come on and say hello to everyone?
Yeah. Good day, everyone. Greetings from Korea. I'm Min Jae-baek from East Asian Australasian Flyway Partnership, and it's a great pleasure to join this global joint webinar. And on behalf of the EAAFP Secretariat, I really thanks to this amazing global World Migratory Bird Day partners and its partnership, the Environment for the Americas and Convention on Migratory Species and African Eurasian Waterbirds Agreement for co-organizing this webinar and for our strong global partnership in raising awareness of migratory birds conservation and with driving the meaningful action across the countries and flyways. Especially, I also want to extend my thanks to Dr. Taej for joining us and his support given the challenges of time difference. And I believe our conservation efforts must thrive as a unified partnership. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Min Jae. We really appreciate your joining. I know it's late where you are in South Korea, but we appreciate your partnership. For those of you who aren't aware, we meet every week, these three organizations and groups, to help plan World Migratory Bird Day, and that's throughout the year. So it takes every week of the year to keep the program going. We really appreciate the support that we get from one another. So thank you so much, and thanks for joining today. We also want to thank our sponsors and supporters from the Americas who help make the program possible in the Americas. These are the groups that provide the support that helps us to develop the materials that we provide to you, to host these webinars, and to do the many other activities that make the program such a success. So many thanks to all of our partners and supporters who've made this possible in 2026 again. And as you know, if you're joining for the first time, just want you to be aware that World Migratory Bird Day has been working for many years to raise awareness about migratory birds, the factors that threaten their populations, and the ways that you and your communities can get involved in protecting them. And we've really hit on some very important topics, from plastic pollution to declining insect populations, to the importance of partnerships and successful bird conservation activities. So I know that every year the art is one of the big things that aspects of the program that people wait for. And so we're very excited about this year's art. It was hand embroidered by our artist in Brazil. It's absolutely beautiful. And each of the species reflects a different topic that we want to address during this year in terms of community science and how people can get involved in helping us to protect birds through supporting community activities. This is our artist, Luisa Lacerda. Again, she started doing embroidery during COVID just as a side hobby, and you can see that in a very short amount of time, she became quite an expert. The art, again, is beautiful. Yes, I love all your hearts and other responses to this, but she did an amazing job, and we'll be using the art throughout the year to highlight these species as well as to raise awareness of the importance of community science to bird conservation. Please remember that we have so many other materials for you to use. These are on our website. Many of them are downloadable. Please make sure you go to our shop or to the Trello board where you can find them. You can use them in your activities. They are free for your use to download. So please check it out. And if you need any information, we're constantly adding new items and details to this site. Our next webinar will be equally interesting. We're going to focus on some of the ways that you can get involved in community science using the barn swallow as an example. We'll have a representative on from CitSci. This is a program that you can use to create your own citizen science project, or you can join Journey North's project on barn swallows. So we'll teach you a little bit about that, and it should be a really fun webinar. Today, though, we have three amazing speakers for you. We have Taej Mundkur, who is in India right now, and he'll discuss the 60 years of the International Waterbird Census. Alex Sansom from the Caribbean. He'll talk about the Caribbean region's waterbird census, and then we'll bring it home with Karina Ávila. He'll talk about community science for the conservation of American oyster catchers. Before we begin, I'll do one more reminder that if you need Spanish translation, please go to the interpretation globe at the bottom of your screen, where you'll find our translator, Claudia, who does an excellent job. Thank you, Claudia. And she'll be translating into Spanish for you. If you need, at the end, we'll have a presentation in Spanish. If you need English translation from that Spanish presentation, you'll also go to interpretation and Claudia will be there. Miguel, would you like to do that in Spanish one more time?
Sí, por supuesto, muchas.
Of course. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today to this series of webinar for the World Migratory Bird Day. We are very happy to truly have an international panel that focuses on the census of water birds and connection through our communities. For the rest of the presentations, we have the first two presentations in English and then the last one will be in Spanish. So if you're a Spanish speaker and you want to listen in Spanish, you can find the globe icon in the lower part of your screen, and there you can select the channel that you prefer to listen to. There, Claudia will be translating to Spanish for the first two presentations and to English in the last presentation. And as I said, Karina is going to speak in Spanish, so if you're a Spanish speaker, you just need to stay in the same channel of Spanish. So we can go ahead. Thank you, Susan.
And now I would like to invite Dr. Taej Mundkur for his presentation. Dr. Taej has so much experience. It's hard to go into the amount of international, global experience that he has working for bird conservation. But he's currently the senior advisor to Wetlands International, and he leads major flyway programs across the Central Asian Flyway and beyond. He also coordinates the International Waterbird Census and the Asian Waterbird Census and the development of the globally recognized water population estimates. That's just a very short version of all the accomplishments that he has, but I want to give you the opportunity to have more time to work with Dr. Taej. So Taej, please join us, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Susan, and it's a great honor and pleasure to be talking to all of you in the Americas and around the world for World Migratory Bird Day. As Florian said in his introduction, I've had the honor and pleasure of being part of the World Migratory Bird Day family since the initiation in 2006 in Kenya, where we had a most amazing inspiring event that really has set the stage for these annual events that offer the wonderful opportunity to raise awareness about birds, the beauty of birds, and the need for their conservation. And this happens in all the flyways of the world. And as new generations of young people come forward, we need to make them aware of what's going on and give them the tools to be part of this journey with all of us to raise awareness, love, and hope for migratory birds and their habitats. I do have a presentation, and I hope that that can be shared.
And we're ready
Susan?
for you. Yes, it's up.
Oh, I don't see it. I only see myself. That's strange. What do I do?
The me unspotlight. Well, let's see. You're not spotlighted anymore. So did that help?
No, I'm now seeing your name.
If you look at the top of your screen, do you have a choice between two screens?
Yes.
Choose the other
Thank you.
one.
That worked.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And as was mentioned, this year is a very special year because it's the 60th anniversary of the International Waterbird Census. What is the Waterbird Census? What do we do? How do we do it? Is what I'm going to be talking about. I work with Wetlands International, an international NGO focused on wetlands, and one of the main areas of work, in fact, the initial area of work, was about waterbirds. How can we better study waterbirds, not only in one country, but across the ranges of these species, to better understand what's happening in terms of numbers, and when there are problems, doing something about them. We very quickly realized it's no use looking at waterbirds in isolation. We've got to look at waterbirds within their habitats, and therefore the Waterbird monitoring program has been increasingly a waterbird and wetland monitoring program. So next slide, please. Just to give you a flavor of the types of families of waterbirds that are being covered by the International Waterbird Census, you'll see many pictures here that may be species that are not familiar to you in the Americas, and I've tried particularly to bring these up today because this gives you a chance to see some of the beautiful diversity of waterbird families covered by the International Waterbird Census in other parts of the world. You've got grebes, storks, geese, pelicans, ducks, and shorebirds. And that's the little special bird, the spoonbill sandpiper, a critically endangered species of East and Southeast Asia. Next slide, please. And you've got birds like cranes, herons, terns, moorhen, more shorebirds, gulls, the iconic flamingo, of course, the lily trotters or jasanas, and cormorants as some of the families that are covered by the Waterbird Census. Next, please. As we know, many of these waterbirds are flying along what we call flyways, and in order to help conserve migratory birds, we've divided the world into multiple flyways. You can consider three main flyway areas. One flyway group being the Americas from North to South America, one being Africa to Eurasia, and a third being Asia into the Pacific or into Australasia. But that blurs the story really, and species and populations actually follow perhaps a little more detailed migration route. And we've divided, therefore, the world mainly based on the shorebirds, which are among the longest distance migrants, into these many different flyways. I won't go into the details here, but just suffice to say that the important thing is that most flyways overlap in their breeding and staging areas, which means that if we are trying to conserve migratory birds, we don't focus just on our flyway, but we also look at what's happening in other flyways and work together. Next, please. The International Waterbird Census started way back in 1967 in the Western Palearctic in Europe mainly, and it was started by an organization called IWRB, which is one of the three organizations that came together to form Wetlands International in 1996. Since it started in 1967, it's now one of the largest and longest running biodiversity monitoring programs of its size, a global program. And in order to understand what's happening to these waterbirds, the idea is to count them when we think most of them are not moving around too much, and that is the northern winter period, which is January, February in Africa, Europe, Asia, Australasia, and February in the neotropics. That's when they're normally counted. It is a citizen science program, and it has been a citizen science program ever since it started, even before the term was coined. And it depends on thousands of volunteers who go out every year and count the waterbirds. Currently, we have more than 189 countries and territories covered by the census, more than 67,000 wetlands that have been surveyed, more than 2 billion waterbirds covered. And we've used that information from the census to understand trends and population sizes based on the information collected annually for more than 570 populations. Next slide, please. Where do we count the waterbirds? Well, we count the waterbirds where the waterbirds are found. These are wetlands. And going by the Ramsar definition of wetlands, you would know that wetlands cover a variety of different habitats, freshwater, coastal, inland, and these include national parks, sanctuaries, flyway network sites, Ramsar sites, World Heritage sites, agricultural sites, unprotected sites, which is important because that helps to identify priority sites for conservation, and in many countries, the important bird areas. Next, please. As I mentioned, the census started in 1967, and that's the map down on the left, which was the first year of the count. But in 1987, the Asian Waterbird Census started. And over the last decades, you can see that the different regional census have started. Please, next slide. And in 2025, you can see most of the world is participating in the census. Canada and the US are not formally part of the census, but we collaborate with them for analysis of of global or regional nature. Next, please. Who conducts the census? Well, people conduct the census. How is it coordinated? By people, by volunteers, from NGOs, from governments, researchers, or just individuals who are interested. And we are very proud that we have a large network of coordinators. Here are the logos of many of them. And without them, the census wouldn't be what it is. Next, please. If we look at the sort of mechanism of doing the counts, it is the volunteers who form the bedrock here in red, who go out and count the birds every year, collect the information, send that to either a state coordinator or a national coordinator who checks the information, produces reports and shares that information, and then sends it upwards to the regional level or the flyway level for collation. In each country, we have a coordinator. And next slide. You can see for Colombia, Calidris is an organization that serves as the national coordinator. This is the cycle of the annual International Waterbird Census. It starts at the top at 12 o'clock with people going out and counting. The 3 o'clock here is the data analysis, checking, and report writing, making that information available to the world for awareness raising, turning that information into policy relevant and conservation relevant information at the local, national, international, and global level, and finally making that information available for managing wetlands. And then back next year is the next count. So next slide, please. The important thing is that the data is being used at every level, from the wetland level to the state or provincial level to the national level, flyway level, and global level for different purposes. And so everybody can contribute, and your contribution helps build steps along the ladder from local to global. Next, please. The conventions globally and regionally, the agreements are using this information, and the critical site network tool is a tool that identifies internationally important sites for different populations. This was developed with Iowa, the African Eurasian Waterbird Agreement, Wetlands International, BirdLife International, and Ramsar Convention. And for every population in the African Eurasian region, we have identified different important sites at different times of the year, whether they are protected or not, and have used this to prioritize sites for conservation. This kind of tool could be extended to other parts of the world as well. Next, please. The census, because it's undertaken every year, over time you get a trend of the information about a population, and that through detailed statistical analysis can tell us whether the populations are going up or going down, and can alert us to take conservation action and prioritize species and prioritize species and populations for conservation action. So this is really important. Thank you. Next one. In each region, we have different coordinators, and I'm very pleased that we've got Alex Sampson, who's responsible for the Central American Waterbird Census, but another census within the Americas is BirdsCaribbean, and we have good information being generated that helps to raise awareness about the problems in wetlands and for local groups to take action for conservation. Next, please. All the information that's collected is available on an open access website, and this is the kind of information you can choose for each flyway, and it gives you the numbers of birds from each country that are fed into the annual database. And this is updated every year. Next, please. Besides bird numbers, we also collect information on wetland threats, and this helps to take action locally or nationally. And this is becoming really important as we are losing many of the wetlands and waterbirds. Next, please. As I mentioned, the 2026 has been the 60th year. We've produced a brochure which tracks the history and provides a lot of case studies. I encourage you to download and to read this. I'm sure you will find it really interesting. Next, please. To celebrate 60 years, we've come up with a new website. As you can see here, covers the world with all these green dots, which are really the stories from individual counters. And if you can press again, you will see the story that's come to us from Colombia. We are very happy to have received several from the Americas this year. We will continue to update this through the year. It's available in English and Spanish and many other languages. Next, please. The census provides a wonderful opportunity for public awareness and through newspapers, through radio, TV, and other social media. And this is an example announcing the census in Nepal, and that generated a lot of interest this year. Next. And then you get articles like this in the local newspaper, which talk about the problems in some of the wetlands. This slide is really special to me because I was very fortunate to be in Colombia and Cartagena in February, where I participated in the Neotropical Waterbird Census for the very first time. And I had the opportunity to talk to and work with a number of people on this census. If you can tap the slide again, Susan, please. This is the work that happens after the census, pulling the data together. This is really important before people forget what they've counted, and we make sure that there are no mistakes. And if you tap it again, please. The census team was not just adults, but a lot of young children who were so good. I was so impressed with them. And I think this is the success. If we can get the youth involved in counting waterbirds, we will then have conservation frameworks for the future that build on the interest of local people everywhere. I'd like the next slide, please. This is just some happy people from around the world showing you under the very different conditions, from snow, from mangroves, from lakes, from deserts, where people go out and count waterbirds. And I'd really like to say thank you to all these people in these pictures and around the world, the tens of thousands of people over the last 60 years who've made the census such a success. And please keep up the good work. The regional coordinators, the national coordinators, and the participants all make this a grand success. The next is the last slide, which has a number of links. The links in the bottom in bold are for the Caribbean Waterbird Census, the Central American Waterbird Census, and Neotropical Waterbird Census. And please use these links to find out more. And if you have questions, do get back to the regional coordinators in your region or us at the global level. I'd just like to mention that we have a Waterbird Fund, and the idea is to use this fund to generate resources to support the census. So we'd like all help possible to raise funds that can be directed to supporting your efforts in the field. And with that, I'd like to stop and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Taej. Thank you for staying up late and for joining us today. Also, thank you for your global leadership of this program and for making it such a success. We really appreciate your hard work that we know goes into all of this and all the communication with the groups around the world. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Susan.
And next up, what we've done is we're taking this down to the ground and introducing you to some people who are working with the programs. Taej is organizing it globally, and so now I'm excited to present to you Alex Sansom, who's an ornithologist with a background in ecology, conservation, and animal behavior. She's originally from the UK, but she moved to live in the tropical and ornithological paradise, she describes it, of Trinidad and Tobago. So she has been the Waterbird Program Manager at BirdsCaribbean, and she coordinates the Caribbean Waterbird Census and supports the organization's work in education, outreach, monitoring, and the conservation of shorebirds, waterbirds, and wetlands across the Caribbean. So Alex, are you able to turn on your camera? Yes, you're up. I'm going to spotlight you for everyone and let you begin your presentation. Thank you, Alex.
Great. Thank you so much, Susan. I'm really happy to be joining today from Trinidad. Yes, and I'm going to be talking, as Susan said, about an example of one of the survey projects that contributes to the International Waterbird Census that Taej was just talking about. I'm going to run through kind of what the Caribbean Waterbird Census is, a little bit about how we recruit people and get people joining, and then let you know about how we move from kind of collecting data from volunteers and NGOs and partners to conservation actions on the ground. So next slide, please. So we've been collecting data from the Caribbean Waterbird Census since 2010, and it was set up to try and understand the kind of status and distribution of waterbirds in the region. So we can answer questions about what species are there, but also things like how numbers are changing over time and how the birds might be affected by threats in their environments and how the environment changes over time. Next slide, please. And why do we want to know this in the Caribbean? Well, it hosts almost 200 species of waterbirds. Many of those are migrant species, and the Caribbean is a really important place in the flyway. So, for example, it's a very important place on the Atlantic flyway for shorebirds, and it means it hosts lots of threatened shorebird species, either at stopover sites or over winter. So species like piping plover and red knot. And Caribbean wetlands also host rare endemic species like the West Indian whistling duck. Next slide, please. CWC counts can take place at any time of year, and we're very happy to receive data like from anybody at any time of year. But we have a regional count that takes place in January and February every year. And that's like a snapshot of the resident birds and the birds that are overwintering in the region. So it's not including birds moving through on migration. More recently, we're trying to encourage more people to collect data during fall migration so we can understand more about how those wetland sites are being used by the migratory shorebirds I was just talking about. So hopefully we'll have more data from migration in the future. Next slide, please. We use the same definition of what a wetland is as the IWC. So pretty much anywhere it's wet. We encourage counts to happen in protected areas and sites that are designated, but they can take place anywhere in any wetland in the Caribbean. I should also say we work within the insular Caribbean, so that's the islands in the Caribbean region. Anyone can take part in the CWC. We have lots of partners through the region, and those partners are NGOs and bird clubs, also protected area managers, people who work for governments, and people who just volunteer their time to do the CWC. Next slide, please. We collect our data using eBird. We have an eBird project now. We have for the last couple of years. So people have to join the project and then use that project when they add their lists in eBird. And we are collecting waterbird data where we ask people to make a complete checklist. So that means counting every single bird you see, so all the species. because that data is much more useful in eBird. We also have habitat monitoring forms now online, and these are separate to eBird, and we ask people when they start monitoring a site to describe what the site is like and also identify threats to that site and potential future threats. Next slide, please. So how do we get people out counting the birds for the Caribbean Waterbird Census? It's a big region and it's very diverse. And sometimes people find counting waterbirds challenging because of the way they congregate in big groups, and that some species like shorebirds are difficult to identify. So next slide, please. We hold in-person training workshops to help with that. We do these whenever we can get funding to do them. These are region-wide, so people come from many different islands, join the workshop, they learn about bird ID and survey methods. We do lots of practice in the field. And then we also talk about threats during those workshops and conservation actions and kind of how to raise money to do surveys and conservation work. We also try to send participants small grants after the workshop so they can follow up with monitoring and conservation actions once they've completed that training. It's like a 1-week workshop where they learn all this stuff. Next slide, please. And once people are trained, we ask them to go away and share that information with others so they can train people in how to do CWC on their home islands. This is the same group that Taej highlighted. This is an environmental awareness group in Antigua and Barbuda. And they have formed a bird club and trained people in how to do CWC. And now they have volunteers going out monitoring their wetlands. Next slide, please. We also have a lot of online resources. We have kind of in-depth webinars where people can watch and learn how to do counts and the bird ID. And then we have lots of kind of downloadable free resources that people can use to help them during their counts. So this is a great way for people to kind of have things to take into the field to help them during their surveys. Next slide, please. And then finally, we promote the counts every year. So we promote the regional count on our Facebook page, our Instagram, on our listserv and in our mailing list. And we also promote when we have individual species surveys where people are going to use CWC, if there's any changes. And then also things like World Shorebirds Day, which is when we're trying to encourage people to go out and count shorebirds using the CWC counts. So yeah, next slide, please. So how do we then translate all the people who are doing counts and sending data to our project on eBird into kind of conservation action? Next slide, please. So you can see this is a screenshot of our project page in eBird. We have a lot of data. We have a really big database now, and that can tell us things about what species are present in the Caribbean and where the places are that there are the most shorebirds or the most diversity of shorebirds. So that's like a bigger picture way to use the database that we have, but we can also drill down to the site level and use CWC for conservation action. So the next slide, please. So this example is from Bonaire. This is the Cargill salt ponds. They're right down in the south of Bonaire. The next slide. Thanks. So it's a private salt production facility on the island, and we started doing CWC monitoring there with our partner in 2015. And it became obvious very quickly there were lots of shorebirds using this site. Next slide. So using the CWC data, we were able to have the site designated as a WISN site of regional importance. So there's more than 20,000 shorebirds a year using this site and more than 1% of several species. Next slide, please. Another example is Monte Cristi wetlands in the Dominican Republic. And again, this site has been monitored pretty much since we started doing the CWC project. It's clear that it's a very important site for water birds. Next slide, please. So this is one survey visit by the team from Grupo Acción Ecológica, who are our partner there. They counted thousands of shorebirds in this single visit across multiple days because the area is so big. And now we're trying to get this area also designated as a WISN site. Next, please. And whilst they're there, they're also able to identify potential threats to the birds. And something they found at Monte Cristi was that people were putting out snare traps for flamingos. They catch them and put them into hotels and resorts, which is illegal. And so since they've discovered this threat, they've been able to launch a conservation project And so they've removed thousands of traps. They've trained people in how to remove traps. They've raised awareness about the problem, and they've started a project where they're rehabilitating some of the hotel flamingos to be released back into the wild. And they're also there, like monitoring other things that are going on in the area in terms of like changes to the mangroves, building changes to the hydrology, because they're on the ground doing CWC surveys. Next slide, please. And then just kind of zooming back out from the site level and thinking again, like how CWC helps us understand threats. Next slide, please. We can ask people who are doing CWC surveys to tell us what's going on in terms of threats. So this was a survey we did a few years ago, just asking people to identify major threats at their sites. And understanding things like this means that we can know where to focus our efforts in terms of what threats we need to address. You can see development, pollution and disturbance are big issues in the Caribbean. Next slide, please. So overall, the CWC is filling knowledge gaps and helping us find these sites that need to be protected and designated, but it's also getting people on the ground and helping us understand the threats to wetlands in the region. And most importantly, it's getting people on the ground doing CWC surveys, engaging in those surveys, seeing the wetlands, and then they're able to protect those wetlands. So once people are invested in having, it's their wetland, they're doing the CWC survey, they're invested in protecting it too. I just want to say, yeah, thanks for letting me speak. That's the end of my talk. And thank you so much to all of the people who've ever done a CWC count for us.
Thank you so much, Alex. That was fantastic, and it's amazing to see what y'all have done across the Caribbean region. Just a really great job, and I know how much, how difficult it is to work across a region to travel between locations. You have to take a boat or a plane or something. So,
yes. And I should say, we have so many amazing partners in our region that make this possible. So yes, we're very lucky.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing today. We will be having questions after Karina's presentation. So please, you can start thinking about your questions and putting them in the chat box now, and we'll take them from the chat to our presenters. But now I'd like to introduce Karina Ávila. Karina is a very busy person. She is a biologist and a Ph.D. candidate in the postgraduate program in coastal biodiversity in Brazil. She's been working with shorebirds for over 7 years, focusing on their ecology, population dynamics, and the impacts of human activity. She currently leads the Piru-piru Paulista Project, a research and conservation initiative for the American oystercatcher. And the American oystercatcher is one of our focal species this year. You can see it in the embroidery behind me. So we were excited to not only share her amazing work working in communities to bring people to community science, but also her focus on American oystercatcher. So Alex, Karina, I'd like to bring you up, and let me find your screen. There we are. And I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hola, muy buenas tardes.
Hello, good afternoon, good morning, or good night, depending on where you're watching from. First of all, I want to thank Susan and Miguel for inviting me. To me, it is a pleasure to be able to be here today to talk about one of the species that I am more passionate about, the piru-piru, how we know it where I'm from, as you may know it as the American oystercatcher. And today I'm going to tell you a little bit of our project is Piru-piru Paulista and how that is connected to citizen science. And well, I think most people that are here in the webinar are already familiar with the American oystercatcher. In some places, it is considered as a flagship species because it is very easy to recognize. They have a very intense orange beak. I think that's one of the main features of this species. And it is distributed throughout all the shorelines in the American continent, in both the Pacific side and the Atlantic side. And this is a species that depends on the shore completely. So we're going to be able to look at it in mangroves, estuaries, and beaches, and other shorelines. And it is a migratory species for certain regions, and in other regions it is considered a resident species. And it's a very territorial and vocal bird. Actually, the common name, piru-piru in Brazil, comes from the very strong vocalization. And well, the oyster catcher nests at the beach in the sand. They just make a little hole in the ground. And well, it is true that oyster catchers might place some seeds, branches, seashells around it to create a nest, or any material that they find to be able to make their nest. So the eggs and the chicks are very well camouflaged in the beach, and this is to avoid predators. And it is this feature which also makes them vulnerable to human impacts, and that is why this is a species that was selected as one of the main species for the World Migratory Bird Day of 2026. And one of the things that I really loved about it is that in the art they are representing a juvenile oyster catcher, and that is the time of their life when they face the most risks. And the American oyster catcher is important for many things, but one of the most important ones is that it is a main indicator of the health of the shoreline ecosystems. Like I mentioned, they depend on very specific and sensitive habitats. So any perturbance in the habitat, then the species is going to definitely resent that change. It is a high priority species for conservation due to all the threats that it has throughout its distribution, and especially the threats that they face during one of the most critical phases of their life, which is during the breeding season. It is also a flag species, which makes total sense because it's easy to observe, it's easy to recognize, and that way it is easy to use it as a way of connection between conservationists and the community. The American oyster catchers population is declining at different regions. There is not only one single isolated reason. It is a combination of causes that adds up and contributes to to So if you're listening to the webinar in Spanish, you can go to the main audio or the original audio, and you can listen to the original audio there. Sorry for the interruption. Go ahead. Okay, great. So I was talking about the loss of habitat because of urbanization, and it's precisely in those habitats that are being damaged, then they are also susceptible to other threats like more human impact, pets, and that is especially important during the breeding season. And it is because of this disturbances that the oyster catchers leave the nests, and then we have another problem, which is predators, which can be natural predators that also increase their populations because of human presence, or non-natural predators like cats and dogs. And all of this is intensified because of climate change. Climate change changes the dynamic of the beach. We have beaches that have a higher level of erosion, and we have places where the tide is becoming more and more extreme. Actually, there are areas that used to be breeding areas for American oyster catcher, and they have completely disappeared because of the sea levels. And the list is endless, this list of impacts. Some of them are going to be specific to each region, and others are general around the world. And well, in Brazil, we developed the Piru-piru Paulista Project, which is an initiative that is dedicated to research and conservation of the American oyster catcher in the Paulista littoral. So we do nest monitoring, we do surveys, and we do banding of individuals, and we also make an assessment of disturbance as both human and natural. So the idea is to bring all of this information together for the project, and that way understand of the dune systems that is better preserved in Sao Paulo and outside of Sao Paulo, this type of ecosystems has disappeared. It is also important to mention that it is a Ramsar site and it is an IBA site, and it is protected by two different levels of natural protection. And as I mentioned, we use banding. We do banding, and this is key to our project because this allows us to recognize each bird in an individual way. And throughout time, we are able to identify it and we don't need to recapture it again, so it doesn't go through the stress of being recaptured. So we use two types of band. One is a color plastic band with a big code that can be read from a distance, and the other one is a metal band, which is the official one from the government. Here we have all the permits to be able to carry out the banding, and the government has their own banding system, so we can place on the individuals as well. Next one, please. And well, this is something fundamental for us. But anyway, these are pictures of the banding. We do banding for juveniles and adults. And we also measure them. We do all the necessary measurements for our research, and we also do a description of the nests. And now this is the point where I wanted to get to. This is a fundamental part of our project because everything that I'm telling you for both banding, monitoring, all of those activities, it wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for the fundamental support of citizen science. So in our project, we developed a very inclusive approach. It involves different groups from local communities to bird watchers and biologists with a lot of experience. And in order to do so, to be able to work with the communities, we organize different workshops or training programs for bird monitoring and for American oyster catcher specifically. The first trainings were focused on young people, but we had volunteers of all ages, to be honest. Those workshops include a theoretical part and a practical part. So we teach them about the species, but not only about the species, but also about the habitat where they live. And we also highlight the importance of that habitat in which the American oyster catcher lives. So these are pictures of one of the workshops that we had with the youth of Villa Comprida. And well, to facilitate participation, we use different reporting tools to collect our data. For example, we use a very popular tool that is WikiAves. It is a platform that is 100% Brazilian, and we have found banded oyster catchers thanks to these platforms. But this platform is specialized for bird watchers and photographers. So we also have a project in Nine Naturalists to be able to reach more people, to reach more nature observers. And we also have another method, which is via email and via forms. So there are people that find it easier to send their data this way. But the tool that has worked the best with our communities has been WhatsApp. A lot of people, especially from the communities, don't have the access, or maybe they find it difficult to use these type of platforms. So we just decided to start an open channel via WhatsApp, and they send all of the records that they have there. That is very important because also that is a motivation to continue gathering the data. And through this channel, we also keep them engaged to continue observing American oyster catchers, not only the ones that we have banded already, but those that are unbanded yet, and also to monitor the nests. So the most difficult part is to maintain, I forgot the word. I forgot the word in Spanish, but to keep them interested is one of the biggest challenges that we have currently. So that's why we have that open channel where we communicate constantly, and they can ask questions, and every banded bird that they find, we share with them. We share it in the group. We also give them feedback about the American oyster catchers that they have found, and we also give them feedback, and we give them a certificate every time that they find a banded oyster catcher. They get a certificate, and we also have a program that is called Adopt an American Oyster Catcher. So it is merely symbolic, but it is very important for them because they can name that American oyster catcher that they found. We give them all the information about that individual, like the weight, how old they are, all of that information that we are able to figure out thanks to our research. We share it with them. And that is, I think, a very important step for people to feel as part of the project and not only a mean to get our information. So that WhatsApp channel has helped us to keep that communication with the community, to keep that open channel. And we also work with a community of traditional fishermen. A lot of them don't know how to write. So in WhatsApp, it's easier for them because they just send a voice note and they ask questions and they tell us about what they are recording. So if you're working with community science, I would say WhatsApp, it's a very powerful tool. And besides that, we are working with environmental education. We set up posters and banners during the breeding season, and we mark the nests so they are protected. And well, this Piru-piru Paulista project is part of a bigger project that we have, which is Aves limícolas, or shorebirds of the Paulista littoral. And it's 6 years now that we are working with communities in this project. And all of this that I have told you becomes real when we see things like this happening. This was a very important record for us. The individual C0, he was banded in November 2024 in Isla Cumprida. And thanks to citizen science, we recorded him further south from where he was born in December 2025. And it was maybe like 3 weeks ago that we saw that individual was over 200 kilometers away from where it was born. It was in the south of Brazil. So thanks to citizen science, we are able to answer a lot of questions that we have about the American oyster catcher. Here in the Paulista littoral is a species that is endangered, and we don't know much about it. We don't have much information about the bird, so for us, it was fantastic to find this banded bird 200 kilometers away, and all of this was thanks to the citizens participating in science. And before wrapping up, I would really like to thank everyone, all the people and institutions that make this work possible. I want to thank our partners, our collaborators. We have been financed by mini grants of WaderQuest, and in 2024, we were one of the winners of the conservation funds for shorebirds from Manomet. So we continue to work thanks to them. And I also want to thank our partners like Biocensu, Instituto Ambieco, and we have a very close relationship to the municipality, so I want to thank them as well. And well, from me, that would be all. Thank you so much for listening about our work here in Brazil. And this is my email. If you have any question or if you want to follow us on social media, there is our Instagram profile.
Thank you so much, Karina. That was an excellent presentation, and I hope everyone followed our pathway from the big picture of the International Waterbird Census down to the regional approach, down to Karina's very local and community-based approach. It's really excellent work on the part of all three of our partners, and we just appreciate it so much. I hope that all of you out there got some good ideas. We have just a few minutes for maybe a couple of questions, and so if we could have our panelists turn on their cameras. I'll highlight you. I know that probably Taej is really ready to go to bed, but I'm going to add a spotlight here. We had one question from the audience, and they were asking who does the surveys in North America. Taej, you could probably answer that.
Thank you. I've responded in the chat. So one of the networks that covers shorebirds is obviously the WISN network. And there are multiple groups in the different countries that are involved in different surveys. And so the US Fish and Wildlife Service has teams going out and doing surveys. There are a lot of research teams doing different surveys as well. And of course, you've got the Christmas bird counts that the Audubon and partners undertake every year, which cover shorebirds and other birds.
Thank you, Taej. And we'll be having a Christmas bird count webinar in September, I believe it is. So we'll be talking about that then. But thanks so much for that response. I wanted to ask the group, as community, as doing these projects with a community science approach, how do you ensure that your data and your observations and your species identifications are correct and accurate? I know that's a big question people have about bringing in volunteers for community science. I guess I'll start this one. Let me start with Alex.
Yeah, sure. I guess the short answer is there's no way to be 100% sure that everything is accurate. Because our data is an eBird, that will flag if anything really strange comes up in terms of like unusual birds or birds that shouldn't be at the site where people have been monitoring. And then we just spend a lot of effort providing those resources to people so that they can have those ID cards in the field, supporting people with their ID, running those workshops where people get to intensively learn shorebird ID. Yeah. And I guess one thing we tell people when we give instructions is kind of if you're not sure what the ID is, then don't do it to species level, because eBird has options to kind of, say Western or semi-palmated sandpiper or peep species. You can do that instead. So we try to support people to have the confidence to ID the birds, and also know that it's okay to put in something that isn't down to the species level if they're not confident. But of course we cannot, with all eBird data, we can't be 100% sure that it's perfectly accurate. But we're doing our best to make sure we train people so that it's as good as it can be.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Karina, how do you work with your communities and your participants to make sure that your data is as accurate as possible?
Well, we trust them. We trust in the fact that besides because for us, it is a very easy species to recognize. It's easy to recognize an American oystercatcher, so it would be difficult for them not to record the data well. But it is also true that we have made a lot of efforts in training, in giving workshops, and to keeping an open communication. They ask us things all the time. They ask us, for example, if it is normal to find an American oystercatcher in certain region or not. And there were a couple of times where they recorded a banded oystercatcher, and they were not able to take pictures. And 2 days later, we went to the site where they reported that they saw it, and we found it. So we are able to create this sense of trust between all of us, and I think that's really helpful.
Community to upload photos to iNaturalist or to send you photos and use those for identification purposes is really helpful. And of course, you're focusing on the oyster catcher, which is a more easily identified species, but still. So thank you very much. And Taej, from the more global point of view, how do you look at the data and ensure accuracy?
Training, practice, training, practice, 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 practice. And the more data you look at sites, you realize what are the normal species that are found at sites, what are the normal or usual numbers. But I have to say, one of the beauties of citizen science is that we are learning something new about birds every year. So even if you go to a site where you've been to 100 times, the the next day you're going to see something different. It can be large numbers that pass through on one day, or it can be a vagrant, or it can be an unusual number of birds that have congregated here because the sites nearby have been disturbed or are dry or are flooded. So bird numbers are so variable and species are variable in their distribution that it's only with everyone going out and counting as many sites as possible at the same time, ideally, which is the beauty of a coordinated census like the International Waterbird Census, that we can have better understanding of bird numbers. And in the end, I'm sure there are some mistakes, but the volume of information collected, we hope, masks small mistakes. And again, if we find a problem, we go back and tell them that please check this. Oftentimes, it's simply a mistake in entering the data in one row or another. 50 American oyster catcher instead of the next row, which may be black-winged stilt or something like that. And you can go back and forth with your participants. And once you build the trust and open communication, they will check and get back to you. And having quick feedback, I think, is very important for the coordinators, and so that people don't forget what they've done and the mistakes they may have made or the errors that can be easily corrected now rather than few years later.
Thank you, Tage. Maybe one or so more questions if you are able to hang in there. We have a question about including participants who are disabled. Karina and Alex, have you been able to make the bird counts, the Waterbird census, or your oyster catcher census accessible to disabled participants? Karina, you're nodding. I'll let you go first then. Was that a yes or no?
Es una buena pregunta.
It's a very good question. We have thought about it. We have it in our minds, but it is area in Ilha Cumprida where the American oyster catcher is, because the access is very difficult, but it is something that we definitely think about, and I think we all should.
Birds are located are difficult to access. I think for some places, I know in the United States at least, there are boardwalks and observation stations where people could participate. So it depends on the site. Alex, do you have any locations in the Caribbean where you're able to involve the disabled community?
Yeah, I mean, so we would look at our partner organizations to help us with that and identify those places. But yes, like places where there are boardwalks and more accessible areas, that does happen. I know that some of our partners in the past have taken part in Birdability Week and done things where they've taken people out and counted shorebirds and waterbirds in areas with boardwalks and things like that. So yeah, I think that's a place where we could maybe do more work with local partners to identify those places. Because again, it's the same thing. It's finding places that are accessible, because so many wetlands just are not. They're hard to get into, and yeah, that can be difficult to access. But yeah, where they are accessible, yeah, we would, yeah, like partners have done those sorts of events.
And I guess we could broaden our definition of accessibility to include other forms of disabilities for, instance, low vision or low hearing. So,
Yeah, and
any other.
for waterbirds, that's very difficult, like visual impairments. I feel like you can't rely as much on the calls as the way, when you're doing forest birding, you can use the songs. For waterbirds, it can be very challenging because they don't call all the time, especially some of the shorebirds. But yes, that is something like people can count some species using the calls and the songs.
Good point. Yes. Okay, I'll do the last question. Have there been any recent one-off birds not usually found at a site discovered? I guess they're asking you, have you discovered a new bird that's not usually found? Taej, maybe you'd have a global perspective on that.
Well, every year we get some new interesting observations, and sometimes over time you see that the species is actually spreading because each year you've got a few counts from places that weren't reporting them before. And when you start layering this information, you then get a better understanding of how these species are moving. Um, the gray-headed lapwing in Asia is one example where in the past it was only in Southeast Asia, and over time it's come into parts of South Asia. And oftentimes when you get this information for the first time, you say, "Are you sure?" But then you check, and photographic evidence and then other information helps to justify the observations. And then we are seeing species are moving and trying to adapt to this rapidly changing world. So we can keep expecting different observations of species in places where they weren't found before because they are trying to survive in the changing environment.
Yeah, thank you, Taej. That's true. Things do change and shift, and yes, things are changing rapidly in so many ways. I do want to thank you all. I know, Taej, it's very late for you, but I want to thank you for your amazing presentations and for all the examples that you provided to the audience. Notice that you have a volunteer from Zimbabwe, but if you're interested, in doing a Waterbird census or getting started in your own area or in another community science, citizen science project. There are so many examples like this, so you can use this as a kind of as a baseline for how to do this in your own community. So thank you so much. Reach out to us or to our presenters if you have any other questions, and we look forward to seeing you in the next webinar. Thank you.